The loudness wars. Despite our best efforts to get people to understand that louder is not always better, here we are, some probably 30 years later, and it's still going on. So what I want to do today is give you a few quick tips, a list of 4 plugins that are not limiting, that are going to help you get your masters as loud as your client wants them. Now, a quick disclaimer up front, I would rather we all go back to much quieter masters to preserve the dynamics of music, but we are in service to our clients, and a lot of times, especially when you're working with independent artists on their way up, if their master that you do for them doesn't match the volume of the reference track of their favorite artist, they're going to think that you either don't know what you're doing, and also that their fans are going to hear it and perceive their music as not as good as their favorite artist. So I understand it from their perspective, and I've been mastering for a long time now, and I've come up with some ways to get that volume without having to limit. And one of the main reasons is a lot of mix engineers are using limiting on their mix bus now, which, please, if you're a mix engineer and you see this, please stop. If that's one thing I could change with a lot of the mixes I get to master, and I've had to ask clients to do this, please give me a version with no limiting on your mix bus. But the problem is a lot of times they take it off and then their mix falls apart because they've mixed into it and leaned on it so heavily. So anyway, if you find yourself in a similar situation, you need more volume, your mix is already limited, or you don't want to limit a lot on your master, here's what you can do. Option number 1 is going to be an EQ. Now, for this particular song, I used FabFilter Pro Q3. And I know you're thinking, an EQ, come on, like I thought this video was going to be good. But what I want to highlight for you here is that the boosts are only in the mid-range for this particular song. And one of those ways to get that perceived loudness is boosting the mid-range if the track allows it. Now, if you boost your lows, especially, you're going to eat up much more headroom, and you're going to have a lot more limiting kicking in on your limiter. So experiment with mid-range boost if you're needing more volume, and see how far that gets you towards your end goal of loudness for that particular track. Option number 2 is the Massey Golden Master. Now, I think this is doing the old Lavery Gold, pushing the converter to clip a little bit trick. The lowest threshold setting I can get this to stay on is minus 0.02, and basically that's going to do the least amount. And I'll hit play here. You're not going to hear it. This track isn't out yet, so just bear with me. But you can see it's barely doing anything. So you may be thinking, I came here because I don't want to do limiting, and now you're telling me to do clipping, which some people would think is worse. And sure, on extreme settings it certainly can, but when you use it subtly like this, I do it for a couple of reasons. One, I'm getting about half a dB of gain once it's all said and done here. And the other reason is I like to use Acoustica plugins, and they act a lot more like hardware. They like to see more manageable input volume as if you were using hardware. And if you come into these too hot, you're going to get in a mess real quick. This particular EQ was just a little bit of top end boost. That's not really relevant to what I want to show you today. But the third plugin that can really help is Acoustica Celestial, which is modeling the SSL Fusion hardware. You can see the 2 sections that I use here, the harmonic section, which they call teal staging, and the yellow stereo. Now, just barely doing anything, you can see we're maybe just below 2 on the harmonics and at about 1 on the texture. You can get quite a bit of volume increase, and what's happening here is we're adding saturation to get more volume, because whether you're doing clipping or saturation or a tape emulation, what you're doing is rounding off the transients, because what we need is to have less peaks. In other words, to get everything brought up, we need to bring some of those peaks down of snares and sometimes vocals and things like that have these bursts that will really cause the limiter to react. So if we can deal with those peaks and those transients in the most pleasing way possible, we're going to be able to bring the overall volume of the track up louder. So step 1 with Celestial, experiment here. Like I said, it doesn't take much to get the volume and or the saturation that you're looking for. And then also this dimension part is going to give you some width, and that's going to give some more perceived volume as well. Now, a lot of tracks that you get, the mixes aren't going to be as wide as commercial releases, so you're probably going to need to widen them a bit anyway. And as you're doing that, you can get some more increased volume. And lastly, I didn't use it on this particular track, but another one that I like to use often is Crane Song Phoenix. And this is doing a tape emulation. And you can also push into this pretty heavily in a similar way to what I do with Acoustica Celestial. And it will give you increased volume and round off some of those transients in a really pleasing way. So the last thing I want to show you before I let you go here is doing all of this subtly with each step. A little bit of mid-range, a little bit of clipping, a little bit of harmonics and width. Watch what the limiter, which ends up being on the master bus here, as the song kicks in, the limiter doesn't do anything. And so this is perfect for a mix like this that it sounded like to me already had some limiting on the mix bus. So from a technical perspective, you don't need any more limiting. Things are glued together, but the client wants more volume. And what'll happen is when you get that and you instantly go to your limiter and you try to push this up 2, 3, 4, 5 dB, it just sounds smaller and smaller, even though the overall volume is getting louder. So as you can see here, we're able to get around -9 to -8 LUFS, and we're able to meet the reference track that the client had, and we're actually not having to do any further limiting. This is just here just in case to catch anything that the others may have missed, but we were able to take this track, get it nice and loud. The client's happy. I'm happy because I was able to do it with the least audio destruction possible. So anyway, I hope that helps, guys. If you're having clients like I am and they just want things louder, and again, we're not blaming the client. It's an overall issue of the industry that we've all got to sit down and figure this thing out together. But if you need things loud, I just wanted you to know there are ways to do it without limiting. I hope this is helpful. Also, keep in mind, you can use this on individual tracks. It doesn't have to be just in a mastering setting, but try some mid-range EQ, try a little bit of clipping subtly, and try a little bit of saturation, either console style or tape emulation. And that way you're going to get something as loud as you need it to be without it falling apart. All right, guys, my name is Josh. This is Soul Studios YouTube channel. Appreciate you being here. If you found this video useful, please consider clicking on the super thanks, and I'll be back again soon with more content for you. All right, thanks, guys.